Today, we have my younger brother, Lester Holt, from NBC News as our guest on Alaska Beyond. Lester, welcome.
Thank you.
It's weird to have
It's weird to have you introduce me that way, because when I fly Alaska Airlines, and inevitably somebody in the crew will recognize me, they don't come up and say, "Are you Lester Holt?" They'll go, "You're Swani's brother. You're a legend."
Well, in my own mind, yeah. That is pretty funny. The first time you called me and told me that, it was just hilarious that they didn't call you Lester Holt. You're Swani's brother.
Yeah, one of the flight attendants said, and then over the period of the flight, people, "I hear you're Swani's brother," and I don't think anybody once mentioned my name. It was hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Question comes up all the time, and I really don't like answering the question, but we have to. Why we have different last names? Our mom was married once before, and I was a product of that first marriage, so that's why my last name is Swanigan, and your last name is Holt. But you're my brother.
Well, we're brothers.
Yeah, people say, "Well, is he your half brother?" No. He's my brother.
My brother, amen to
He's
that.
my brother. I've known him since the day he came home from the
My
hospital.
big brother.
Yeah, I knew him from the day he came home from the hospital, saw you walk the first time, saw you start talking the first time, had no idea what it was going to lead to.
And haven't shut up yet.
No, you haven't. But you turned it into an interesting vocation, I have to say.
No, it's been great, and we'll probably talk about it, but you were such a huge inspiration and kind of put me on the broadcasting track.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I do remember our days, our younger childhood. I'm 8 years older than you, but roaming the hills of Northern California. Mom and Dad would just, or Dad was at work, but Mom would just say, "Be home in time for dinner." Yeah. And we'd take off and roam the hills, and you were this little guy. You were like 5?
Yeah, 4 or 5.
Four
yeah,
or 5?
Dad was stationed at Air Force, where I was born, the Air Force Base outside San Francisco in Marin County, and I think we were living off base at that point.
Yes.
And beautiful hilly Marin County, and I do remember kind of like, well, you know, you're in charge, and you're not going to let me get in trouble, and we would just take off.
We take off. Now, that would not be acceptable parenting today. You know, they have the
not.
controversy over that kind of stuff. But back then, that's what everybody did.
Yeah, and you felt it felt like a safe community. It was a military community.
Never once worried about anything happening and roaming the hills and everything. So it was so much fun. We'd be out on our bikes, and it was just a great childhood.
It was. And California. Well, you know, I live in New York now, but California will always be my home spiritually. I mean, this is where I grew
You're a
up.
California dude.
I am.
Yeah. Our parents used to spend a lot of time talking about current events and world events at the dinner table. Do you have memories of that?
I do remember, and it was, you know, you talk. A lot of people talk about the importance of the family meal, and we would have that family meal at the exact same time every night, and you know, we talk about our lives, we talk about what was happening in the world, and of course, you know, at the time the Vietnam War was raging. Dad had been over there, and I guess that cemented this fascination with current events, and that continued. I remember, you know, going forward years later, you know, Richard Nixon was about to resign. He was going to make his speech, and I dutifully got out my tape recorder and I put the cassette in, and I was going to record it because someday I'm going to play that tape for my kids of that history, not knowing there would be a thing called YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, and that anybody could click it on
those
right
technologies,
now.
yeah.
But I think we all grew up with that appreciation for the importance of the events around us.
And our sister and I were older, so early on, Mom and Dad required that we read the first section of the newspaper before dinner. So we had to be able to discuss the day's events, and if we didn't know, then we had to go do some homework and research. So
yeah, they lightened up by the time I got to that age.
Yeah, I think they burned out. They gave up after.
And by the way, I had no curfew either, but that's another story.
What?
No curfew.
Oh, that's wrong.
I was a good kid.
So then in the 1960s, late 1960s, we're up in Alaska. We got transferred to Alaska, which as a kid I thought was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, having to move to Anchorage.
Really? I was so excited about snow for the first time.
Not me, man. I was a California kid. I didn't want to go to Alaska, and it turned out to be just a wonderful thing. And I eventually went into radio there, and you were my little brother, and I used to sneak you in. Remember that?
I remember you were working an evening shift, and there was 2 radio stations, right? There was a
AM and
KBYR,
FM.
there was an AM station, an FM station, and you were kind of running the FM.
Yeah.
And you'd let me come in there, and I'd go in, you know, look at the controls and queuing up records, and what are they, carts, I think they were called.
Yeah, they were like 8-track,
like
similar to 8-track
right.
cartridges, yeah.
And I think that's where I was bitten by the bug, the broadcast bug.
Oh, I knew you were, and let you fiddle around with the equipment and everything.
And there was a TV station attached to it.
yeah,
all.
KTVA. So those of our viewers that live in the state of Alaska, KBYR, KNIK, KTVA, and I don't even know if they have the same radio
Yeah,
call
they may have
letters
changed.
anymore. But those were the stations. It was the CBS affiliate in. Oh, I shouldn't say that. You're an NBC.
Oh, that's okay. It was back then.
It's a CBS affiliate in Anchorage, and you had the honor of being thrown out a couple of times.
Yeah, I sensed that I was causing a little bit of anxiety for your boss.
Yes, he did not like having a child of your age there messing around with the equipment. He'd throw you out, and as soon as he left, I'd bring you back in. So that was the type of person I was.
No, you are. You remain a terrific big brother who's always looking out for your kid brother. But that, I remember that so clearly, and to this day, I'm like, why did you get out of broadcasting?
Yeah.
Because you were really good at it.
Well, not as good as you. I think you're like lightning in a bottle, your level of talent. I think I was okay at it, but the dream for me was driving jets. I just wanted to fly airplanes.
Flying thing worked out for you, what, 26,000 hours?
26,000 hours with Alaska Airlines. It was a great run,
Amazing.
good times. And then one of the biggest aviation events in both our memories happened at Anchorage International Airport. You remember that?
I remember the 747, and I thought about this recently because I think it's the 50th anniversary of the 747. It was coming through Anchorage for the first time because back then they had to fuel in
Yes.
Anchorage. And you piled our other brother and myself in your little 64 Chevy Impala.
Chevy Impala, baby. It was my first car. It was beautiful.
And we drove, this is before, high security at airports, so we drove to, there was a fence, maybe a 6-foot fence between us and the taxiway. And here it came, this Pan Am 747 rolling by. None of us had seen anything like it.
It was amazing. Yeah, it was just such a first in aviation, and I can't believe they're retiring the airplane now, and they don't build them that, well, I guess the 380 is
building,
bigger.
Yeah, they're building the freighter version of it. Yeah,
the freighter version of it, but it was such an era that we saw ushered in part of that aviation history.
Yeah, but I knew then that you had the flying bug, and then we ultimately transferred back to California. You stayed in Alaska, went to school.
I was in college, so you guys left, and I was at University of Alaska, and then
you were DJing because I remember you
Yeah.
you sent me a tape of you DJing at a station in Fairbanks.
Fairbanks, yeah.
And I would study that tape, like, oh, that's good, the way you would talk up the records. For those who don't know radio, the instrumental portion leading up, to the first verse, back then the DJs would talk over, it's 54 degrees, and and here is Captain Antonio or whatever.
Yeah. By the way, you played with them once, didn't you?
Oh, yes, I did. I didn't drop that for that reason.
I was going to bring that up later, but since you mentioned them.
Yeah, I was filling in on the Today Show, and somebody knew I played bass and said, look, Captain and Tennille is going to be on. You want to play with him? Like what, play? Like, yeah. So do it to me one more time.
And you're an accomplished musician.
Well, I'm a musician. I have a band. That's one of my little side things in case this TV thing doesn't work out. But yeah, that's very funny you mentioned that. Or I guess I mentioned it. That was the first of many groups I was able to play with, from my Today Show experience.
Well, I'm a big admirer of your career, but things like that make me jealous.
No, don't be.
And the airplanes that you've flown make me jealous. So we'll get to that in a little bit.
Good.
But after the family left Alaska and I was still up there, you were in high school in the Sacramento area.
Yeah.
And you kind of became the main announcer at Cordova High School, didn't you?
Yeah, I had, because of that radio passion that was already flowing through me, somehow I got the gig of being the morning announcer. And I decided to turn it into a newscast. So I would do it in a very radio kind of format. So, it was the Cordova Lancers. Good morning, Lancers. This is Lester Holt. Here's what's happening today. Spanish Club is meeting in room 304 at 4 o'clock today. For those who sign up for the volleyball tournament, I do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then at the end, and that's what's going on. At 8:38, you're up to date. That was my so I kind of became known as this little radio nerd that would do the morning announcements. But ultimately I was practicing.
You were doing that.
Someday I'm going to really be doing this.
And it was good preparation because later on opportunity knocked. I came back to Sacramento. I was on my way to Air Force pilot training. They didn't have a slot for me right away. So I figured rather than sitting around doing nothing, waiting to go to pilot training, I picked up a job at a local radio station. Controversial call letters for that station.
Yeah.
K-R-A-K.
Crack radio.
Crack radio.
Can you imagine that in 2019?
No.
Pretty sure they
But
changed the call letters.
It was one of the biggest country western radio stations.
It was 50,000 watts. You could hear it all at night. You could hear it up and down I-5. Yeah.
If you had false teeth sitting on the counter, you could hear that radio station. It was so powerful. So I worked part-time there, and finally my Air Force pilot training slot came through. It was time to go to Oklahoma to learn how to fly jets. And so I gave my notice. And they said, wow, you worked out so well. We loved having you here. We don't know how we're going to replace you. I said, I have the replacement in mind. It's my brother. Well, how old is he? Well, he's 16 or 17. I forget exactly what you were at that age. 16 or 17. No way. I said, trust me, if you do not at least talk to him, you will regret this. You will rue the day that you made that decision. He said, whatever. So I left, and then it's not like today where we have cell phones that we talk to each other every day in constant communication. So I'm in pilot training, and a few weeks later, I get this call. Hey, Mike, they hired me.
Yeah, hired me.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing the same shift you would. It was midnight to 6 on Saturday and Sundays.
Yeah, go forth with the story.
Yeah. So I'm a disc jockey, and you had taught me the basics of running the control board, and I'd gotten my FCC license, which you had to have back then to run the transmitter, and it kind of took off. I'm in high school, and I'm doing this weekend gig on the radio playing country music, which I knew nothing about, but I learned enough to be able to pull it off, and then graduated high school, went to college locally in Sacramento, and they offered me a full-time job if I would do news, be a news reporter. So they gave me a Jeep Cherokee, and they put a big KRAK logo on the side of it. It had police and fire scanners, and I started chasing news, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever done in my life.
You were hooked, weren't you?
I was hooked, man. I was showing up at crime scenes and fires and covering city council and this and that, and didn't look back. And then ended up doing radio in San Francisco News Radio, and from there.
And that's an interesting story. You going to KCBS. Tell me about your interview there and how that went.
Yeah, so they had a friend told me they had an opening there at this all news radio station, CBS-owned station.
And you were like 19.
Yeah, at this point, I was 20 years old.
20
I was starting my junior year in college, and do the interview, and Jerry Nachman, I remember he was a legendary New York newsman who was running the place at the time. He asked me, why should we hire you? And I had this briefcase I carried, and I opened it up, and I had my tape recorder, and I had it was kind of a coupling device where you could put the phone and a microphone and do your reports. And I said, because I'm ready. This is my equipment. If something happens in this building right now, I can be on the air live before you can. And I think that impressed them. That I was this news nerd, and I got the job. I used to sleep with scanners in my apartment.
You were a junkie.
I had scanners
News
in my car.
junkie.
If something happened in San Francisco, I did not miss it. I was in the car and doing the bullet routine over the hills. But that was a great run. Did that for a year and a half, and then the same person that hired me there went back to New York at the CBS TV station. And I say this out loud. I'm like, I don't know how this happened, but at the age of 22, I was hired as a television reporter in New York City, which isn't supposed to happen. I still feel it was a mistake, but it worked out.
Yeah, it was a good call on their part. Look what it led to.
Yeah.
And then you kind of bounced back and forth across the country with CBS.
Yeah, so it was New York, and then I came to Los Angeles for a while and worked at the CBS station there, and then back to New York, and then to Chicago, where I had a 14-year run. I became a main anchor there. Both of my sons were born in Chicago, and we had a great home there, and then the network came calling, and look where I am now.
Yeah. Tell me about when you first came to NBC. That was a pretty exciting time when you started on the cable side of NBC.
Yeah, it was. I came in the summer of 2000, and it was really the beginning of, I can't think of a more intense news period, even comparing it to right now, because I'm there. It was the 2000 election, Bush-Gore, and we all know that led into the recount. I was on the air for countless hours while we're watching them look at Chad in Palm Beach County, and that story consumed us. And then we went right from that, and then before long, of course, the horrors of 9/11, the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq. That was all in that same period. Yeah. And I was on the air for just tremendous hours and days, and really cut my teeth on the network level during that intense period.
Yeah, 9/11 was really interesting because that involved your hometown.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, MSNBC was just across the river from Manhattan in a place called Secaucus, about 8 miles, and I had just come out of the river and pulling to work, and we saw smoke from the direction of New York. Walk in, they hadn't even gone on the area, and I see the monitor, and immediately, because I covered a lot of aviation at that point, and I remember I ran the studio, and I said, "Give me a mic and an IFB." IFB is the the sound thing that producers can talk to me.
Yeah.
No one even assigned me. I just went out there,
just went in.
and they put me in front of a monitor, and they played back what had just happened, this plane hitting, and we froze it. And I had a telestrator, and I remember looking at it. I said, "That's not a small plane," and I pointed to the engines under the wings, and and then of course we were into it. But my sons both went to school in Greenwich Village, Soho, so not far from Ground Zero. So I'm trying to do this story, and I would throw to a correspondent, and then I'm feverishly emailing my wife, "Are the kids okay? Are they out of school?" And then I remember at one point, I was so worried about the kids, they were at home. My younger one, I think 5th or 6th grade, I was really worried about him, and he's asking me questions. Well, what happens if they had hit the White House and something happened to the president? So I said, "Tell you what, here's your assignment today. I want you to work on line of succession." And I kept him busy with that.
Oh, really?
And trying to get through that. But it was a weird thing. You're trying to be this dad, be there for your family, at the same time you're covering this incredible story. And I remember I wrote a friend an email, and this is Mr. Newsman. I said, for the first time in my career, I'm covering the biggest story in my life, and I don't want to be here. I want to be home with my family.
Wow.
And I remember reading that later, and did I write that? But that was that was my mindset at the time.
And you got the nickname Iron Pants because of that.
Iron Pants, I think it started with the 2000 recount, but Iraq, all those things were happening, and they just required, we were on the air just for these hours, and they would, I'd be sitting there, and I frankly think it came because I didn't take frequent bathroom breaks during those many hours on there. I'm 60 now, so it would be a different story. We'll leave it at that. Yeah.
So the career as a news anchor seems very glamorous. It is very glamorous, but there's some parts of it that aren't so glamorous that you've shared with me, brother to brother talk, and things like covering hurricanes and sleeping in cars and whatever.
Yeah, it is glamorous. You see the world, you meet people you think you never meet and talk to them, but the fact is we're often running to places that other people are running away from.
Yeah.
And so we go to a hurricane, we've got to think, how do we cover it? How do we stay safe? Is this hotel going to be the place we're going to be? Where are the trees around us? We had to do all this studying. The last hurricane I was in, we got in a little over our skis and ended up having to put a mattress over the window.
Oh, I saw you fighting with that
You see
mattress.
that? Yeah, that was the first hurricane I covered where I thought this may go bad really quickly because we were in the hallway and the building was shaking, but we ended up okay. But I've been to nuclear disasters, Fukushima.
Yeah, you were on vacation with your wife in
we were in
Spain.
In Spain, got up that morning, turned on the TV, and I see all this water they're showing going through this town. And at that point, it wasn't clear how big a deal it was. And I remember sending a note to New York and said, "Look, I'm going out for the dam in Europe. If this becomes anything, let me know." And before long, I get this. We're at a museum, and I get this call. You're on a 2 o'clock flight to London and then to Tokyo at that point, or Seoul, and and we scrambled, and my wife Carol, soldiered on, but that's it's one of the parts of the job. Sometimes you have to drop whatever's going on,
and that's a similarity to what both of our wives go through. Me being an airline pilot, they have to be pretty independent women because we're gone, and your situation was a little harder than ours because yours had no notice. I generally know a couple weeks in advance what trips I was going to be flying or whatever.
Yeah, it's very hard to plan life, and I make a lot of commitments, and there's always but in the event of breaking news, I try to make sure that people have a backup plan. The fact is, we like breaking news. It's exciting. It gets our adrenaline going, and you focus on the root of what you are as a journalist. You're a reporter, and you're on the ground, and you want to tell people what you know and what you don't know. Offer as much analysis as you can, but it requires you have to really focus on what the story is.
You've been talking to a lot of up and coming journalists about different issues that are facing us today and covering the news. Would you go over some of those bullet points with us here?
Yeah, I talk to young people a lot about the importance of critical thinking, and that's don't take everything at face value. That right now we're getting swept under the tsunami of social media. From the time you turn your phone on in the morning till you turn it off at night, there's someone telling you what to think, what's trending, what you should be wearing, what you should be listening to, and we don't take time to think for ourselves about stuff and to process information. There's so many outlets and sources that'll feed you the world that you want to believe, but may not often be the accurate one. So I talked a lot about the importance of those critical thinking skills.
Like taking your time.
Taking your time, and part of what's happening right now in our society is we're all under this pressure to make these snap judgments about something. Something will happen, okay, pick a side. Believe this, believe that, but pick a side. And by the way, when you pick a side, put it out there on social media. And we've seen, there have been numerous examples of late of things that will happen, some things in the news that don't turn out to be quite that you expected them to be. And I always tell young people, it's okay not to know. I said, I don't know. I cover these events every night. The economy and immigration and national defense, all these things. None of these are easy issues. And sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know, let me get some more information. And as journalists, we do that. I mean, as a mainstream journalist, sure, we like to be first, but we'd rather be right. And sometimes we have to wait, take a deep breath, check those sources, check the second source. You know what, let's check another source, and then you go on the air with it. Unfortunately, the pressure of society right now is that you're supposed to have these immediate answers. And so it's really important, and I've been blessed to work with an organization, the Poynter Institute, that's kind of a journalism think tank, and they have a lot of great programs, and one of them I've aligned myself with is trying to educate young people about understanding the sources of news and information and become more literate in consuming news and knowing when to spot the real thing versus something that may be suspect. And that's been a really, really great opportunity, spending some time with kids and really kind of walking them through these exercises of like, okay, let's look at this story. Okay, do you believe it? Why don't you believe it? What do you question? Do you know where that information came from? I know sometimes I kind of drag people around me down because they'll come up to me and say, hey, did you hear such and such? And I'm like, really? Where'd you get that? And I don't do it in a condescending, it's just my natural instinct. It's like, well, where'd that come from? Well, who said it? Well, are they aligned with this person or that person? And that's what we do as journalists.
You've told me in our private conversations how you always try to remember the humanity of the people who you're covering in a story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that comes from just experience of covering a lot of horrible things. We cover a lot of calamities. We often descend on communities that are going through horrible things. We enter people's lives who find themselves on television because they're a victim of circumstances. And I always remind myself, we come in and we do these stories, but in a few days we're going to get back on a plane and we're going to go back to New York, or we're going to go on to the next thing. And that doesn't mean we're bad people, but it's the nature of the way life moves. And so I try to honor and respect those we cover. When some family's sitting outside the wreckage of their home, I immediately go through the process. What if that was our mom?
Yeah.
What if that was our dad? What was,
what if it was me?
Me or my family? How would I want to be treated in the circumstances? And I think it's really important that compassion should be part of what a journalist brings to bear, and to honor people's circumstances, and take no when I don't want to talk, fine.
Just walk away, leave them alone
walk
for a while.
away.
Yeah.
The story's not that important.
Okay.
Very often people do want to share their story, and there's value in hearing their story sometimes. I'm not going to say that's not the case, but compassion is an important part of being a good journalist.
Well, Lester, I'm so proud of you. We're running out of time, so
well,
I'm so proud of my younger brother. You're taller than me, so I could say my big brother.
No, I'm glad we got to do this, because Mike, you have always been this incredible inspiration in my life. And people say, who are the most important people in your career? And you're the first name that came. In fact, we did a Today Show story.
We did.
About you. We went back to Alaska,
Yeah.
and we kind of told that story.
Yeah.
And that first of all, it was so special to be able to spend that time with you in Alaska. But you truly set me on this course, and more than anything, Mike has co-opted this line, be excellent to each other. And you live that, and that's the way we were raised, was to be good to people. you
Treat
know.
everybody with respect, no
I
matter
mean,
who they are,
you
what
know,
their station.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, we both work in these really high pressure environments, but you know, you've taught me that the core of success, above anything, is be a good guy.
All right, bro. Well, I love you.
Love you too, man.
I hope our audience enjoys our time
This is
spent together here.
This is my favorite interview.
Okay.